All right, friends, this is take 2 of this video, and we're gonna pray that it turns out. I recorded this whole thing for you guys earlier this week, and apparently where I had set the camera, the sunlight was flooding in so bright that the entire video portion was just a blur of light. You couldn't see anything, everything. It wasn't even just washed out, like the whole frame was just light. And since this is a video, not an audio podcast, and I have visuals to show you, I am retaping. So welcome. I am so glad that you are here. My name is Amanda Willis. I empower families to wellness authentically through biblically rooted principles. Things like stewardship and created order are really, really important to me and to our family. And so we really work to walk those out in our everyday life and try not to separate how we're living, All of that kind of floods together, and this year we are garden planning, and I have garden planned in a little different method this year, and I was going to share with you. We'll see how it turns out and if I like it and if we keep it for next year. I borrowed a couple of the principles from Erin Rogers. Erin Rogers, who is a Royal Crown Diamond with Young Living, she had shared a few tips as well on her Instagram. And so I was like, oh, I really like this because my brain seems to work a little bit like that. So I'm gonna walk you guys through the process of what I did, and hopefully maybe you'll get an idea or two that you can incorporate, because like I said, some of these are ideas that are borrowed from Erin, but then some of them are things that are, I've watched so many different homesteaders, and I've kind of just pieced together what works for my brain and what works for our family and for the amount of land that we have here on our house, or at our house, because we are not homesteading on 5 acres or a huge property. We are homesteading technically in the city. I say suburbs because Casper is not your normal size city, and it's a lot more like being in the suburbs than it is being in a city. So we have almost just under an acre total of our property. That includes where our house is at and our driveway. And so only some of that is usable for the garden. But what I did first is I kind of mapped out on this very fancy sheet of paper that I ripped out of a notebook, and I drew our garden areas. So we are gardening in some raised beds and then some in-ground plots that we started, and some beds that we started last year. And then we have a couple more that we're going to be adding to our front yard this year. So I'm really excited about that. We had an area where there was an old dead tree in our front yard, and we got it downed. And so now we have space for a garden out there. And so we'll probably be doing raised beds there too, though, because there's a lot of deep roots. It was a huge tree. So I have it just divided side yard, front yard, and backyard. And can't help but chuckle a little bit. If you are a Pod Meets World fan, then side yard and backyard might make you chuckle too. Is it a side yard? Is it a backyard? I'm team side yard. Anybody else watching this? Team backyard? What are you? Okay, and if you were like, what on earth are you talking about? Just ignore it, it's okay. We're moving on. So I drew our garden areas. So just kind of the length of the bed, and I made sure to label, okay, side yard, backyard. And then there's a couple other spaces, like we have crabapple trees, and there's a planter. And so I kind of drew where I'm going to try and use some space over on the sides as well. And that was blank, okay? Started with just the garden space. Then the very next thing I did was pulled out another 2 very fancy pieces of notebook paper, and I folded them in thirds. This is the idea I got from Erin that I think is amazing. So I folded it in thirds here and then opened it back up. 1/3 is for sowing indoors. So these are plants that I'm going to start inside because we are in Casper, Wyoming. Our garden season is not super long. Our growing season is not crazy long. Our average I have to look at the number of days again, but I know our average last frost is around May 20th, but we can get frost all the way, till 4th of July practically. But usually May 20th is the average last frost. And then our average first frost is September 27th. And so we're working around that, right? So there's a lot of things that I've got to start indoors or we would never be able to grow them in that season. So those are going to go in this column. My middle column is when am I moving those plants outdoors? So the plants that I started indoors, when am I going to start hardening them off to put them in the ground outside? And then the direct sow outdoors is the third column. Okay. Then what I did is I kind of started on this side. Yeah. Then what I did is I knew that the very first plants or seeds that I'm going to be starting are our onions. And I know that I need to start those 10 to 12 weeks before our average last frost. And so I did -12 here. So that's going backwards from the last frost. I have -12, -11, -10, etc. all the way down to 0. And I just kind of spaced them so that I would have enough room to write the things I needed to in that area. And then from 0 all the way to 8, I put there. There are a few things I plan to do in the fall. Maybe we will start our garlic appropriately next year. I was hoping to plant it in January when I got some seed garlic because we missed it in the fall. I was told our ground does not freeze here. That is not a true statement this year. Our ground's completely frozen. So we're gonna pray I can start our garlic just as soon as I can dig into the ground. But next year I don't wanna miss it. So I wrote it on the bottom, and then I wanna do some Brussels sprouts in the fall and winter. So I wrote like Brussels midsummer. But before I wrote the Brussels midsummer or any of that, okay, I just had my dates and I had my columns. And then I made sure I had my Clyde's Garden Planner near me. These are fantastic. If you guys don't have Clyde's, I think I paid like $3 or $4 for this. Ordered it online, and and basically what you do is you take your average last spring frost, and you line it up on the date here, and that's going to give you an actual date. Most of what you see on your seed packets are not an actual date because they're mailing them out to a whole bunch of people. And so you're getting more like 6 weeks before your average last frost, 3 weeks before frost, direct sow after your frost, those kind of things. And so depending how your brain works, this is very helpful. I used just this last year, but it only has a limited number of crops on here. So it doesn't have everything. But you don't have to calculate. It tells you when to start things indoors, when to first plant them outside. It tells you when you can expect the harvest from them. And then it also has things like how much sun do those crops need, what plants grow well with it, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a fall frost one on the back for your fall planting. So this was really helpful. I made sure to have this. However, because of the way I was doing it this year, instead of using the date, I just I was like, okay, I know that that's my average last frost date. Let me go back how many weeks-ish. And erring on the side of later in the season than earlier if I'm planning outdoors, because we had snow down in Colorado on June 20th, just a couple years ago. And I believe they did here too. We weren't here yet. So you never know. So then I took each seed packet and I wrote down, like if it said 12 weeks before my average last frost, then I wrote onion, sow indoors, okay? Then I took that same plant and I figured out where am I going to plant my onions in the ground. So that's there. Oh, wait. I did figure out where I'm putting onions, didn't I? Yeah, okay. I was like, that was the first crop I did. I didn't think I missed it. Okay, I haven't studied my map too much yet because we're not even to the seed parts. But I was trying to think through like, okay, last year we had our tomatoes and peppers in 2 beds and I want to rotate those, and where we had our potatoes, I wanted to rotate those to different beds because blight can live in your soil for up to 3 years. And I wanted to try and avoid putting those back into those beds for 3 years. So, or for 2 more years, and then wait another, for 2 more years and then put them back. I don't think we had blight. We didn't have an issue with our plants, but you never know because it can be in the soil without it affecting your plants. So just out of an abundance of caution, I hate that phrase, but there you go. So I did that with each plant. Start it here. When am I moving it outdoors? Okay, where is it going? Starting it here. Where am I moving it outdoors? Where is it going? I did that for everything that we're planning to plant. There are a few things we don't have seed packets for yet and that we want to expand our garden with. So those I wrote up in the corner, and I wrote like, I need seed potatoes. We're gonna need a green stalk because I'm planning to order a green stalk planter, and we're gonna do our strawberries and our mint in there. Some rhubarb, some raspberries we're wanting to start this year. And so I wrote those things down, and then I had to look up for those when's the time to start them and everything because I don't have seed packets for them, right? A lot of those things like the rhubarb and the raspberries, you start from cuttings. So, and then seed potatoes we'll get as we get closer. Then after I had all of this together, I went into Canva and I customized my own calendar. I used the basic, I found this February monthly calendar and I was like, oh, I like that. It's pretty simple. It just has open spaces and it's got my dates on there. But as we start getting into the months where like you end, okay, March ends on a Friday, so it's not a big deal. But then there's months like April ends on a Sunday. So if I was doing this just by regular months, I'd have this whole week that's empty, and I'm transferring my stuff and I'm going to start counting weeks, and I didn't want to get confused. So I started kind of combining my months so that it was just straight weeks and I wouldn't accidentally miss a week or over count a week or double count a week or something like that. So I went to our last average frost date is May 18th. And I went to May 20th. I was like, okay, this week is our last average. I probably could have gone 1 week later just to be safe, but I won't actually put anything outside come that time unless all of the snow on the top of Casper Mountain is gone. I have heard from a lot of locals, if you can still see snow on Casper Mountain, it's risky to plant. So if we can still see snow, I will be pushing things back a little bit. But the plan is this is week 0. Then going forward, of course, positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through my months as far as I printed out. And then I went backwards, -1, -2, -3, all the way to -12, which is next week, which means next week I need to be starting my onion and my sorrel indoors. Sorrel, thankfully, is a perennial. So hopefully once we get it in the ground this year, it'll come back. I bought seeds last year, but we weren't here soon enough. We were closing at the beginning of March. It was like a whole big deal. So we moved right around garden season. Garden starting season, which made it a little tricky. I have a lot of seeds that we didn't get used, but this year they're getting used. So then I just plotted out and transferred everything from this sheet onto the calendar so that I can look at my calendar. And when I'm planning my regular weeks, I can look on Sunday and be like, okay, is there anything I need to start indoors this week? Is there anything I need to harden off? I can look ahead a little bit, and I've transferred, let me go forward, like find strawberries, find seed potatoes, start looking for raspberry cuttings and rhubarb so that I know, okay, I need to look for those here and then I can get them in the ground. And that way it's super simple and everything's streamlined and in one place. And all I need is this and my little map, and I know where I'm putting things. Also, I was very excited because this leaves a lot of empty space. And that way I can make notes on here And then this can serve as a record for me for the coming years. So if I end up, I'm probably going to use a different color pen, and things that I do differently, I'm going to write in a different color pen on here so that I know next year how do I adjust for that. And hopefully each year it'll start getting just a little bit easier. But also every year, I won't have to go look at the seed packets. If I have this done this year and I know 12 weeks before, 11 weeks before, and it worked well, I can adjust it if it doesn't work. But if it works well, then I know all I have to do is print out a new calendar for the next year and transfer my dates again. So it streamlines it just a little bit. I'm trying to think of permaculture principles, right? Like, how am I observing and then adjusting and trying to maximize things, leverage things, more output, less work, all of those kind of things. So let me know, friends, if there's something that you thought of while you were watching this video that you're like, ooh, I bet you, because her brain works this way, she would really like X, Y, or Z. Please let me know down in the comments. I love learning from you guys. I find your tips so helpful, and I hope that this video helped you as well. Until next time, take care, friends. Cheers.